Rob Tebbutt for Boxing News. Delighted to be joined by Mr. Shane McGuigan. We're here in Bournemouth ahead of Chris Billam-Smith versus Mateusz Masternak. How are you, Shane?
Good, thanks, mate. Where have you been?
It's a good question. Been around, been doing a bit of this, but I went to Tashkent. That was interesting. Uzbekistan.
Oh, nice. Oh, cool.
Been to Uzbekistan before, have you?
No.
You're missing out. Beautiful place. How are you?
Good, thanks, mate. Yeah.
Been a while since we've done this. I've mentioned to you off camera, this is the first interview that we've done since Chris Billam-Smith became world champion. So he became world champion and we did the post-fight after the Okolie fight. And this is the first one since.
I do remember it, yeah. Voice was probably gone a little bit. And it was probably at 2-3 in the morning, like our usual one.
5.
Yeah, great times. But yeah, we're back here again. I don't know. It's always nice to go and do a Bournemouth show in the summer, but it's terrible in the winter. That Arnold Joe Jerjai guy, whatever his name was, it was pretty sparse. I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't enjoyable.
Yeah, I said to the WBO Cruiserweight Champion of the World that there is quite the contrast between a summer beach event and it gets pretty cold down here, doesn't it? Like when you get by the sea and stuff, it gets quite bitey. So yeah, hopefully the last time we'll be down here at Christmas.
Yeah, let's make a pact on that one.
So, we are here, as I mentioned, Chris Billam-Smith's first world title defence. Feels a little bit strange to say that after covering his career for all of these years, but we are here, the first defence of his title, and a hard defence at that as well, against Mateusz Masternak, who I kind of mentioned to Chris Billam-Smith that, you know, if you know your boxing and you've been around boxing for a little while, you know how good Mateusz Masternak is.
Yeah, definitely. He's only lost the once since Tony Bellew, which was in 2015. And Chris wasn't even pro then, so Chris turned pro in 2017. So they've only had the one loss between the pair of them since Chris turned pro. And that was to Dorticus, which, you know, he put up a good fight. And I think, you know, same thing, it has to be said for Tony Bellew, and both of those two went on to become world champion. So, you know, Mateusz has done everything that he's had to do up until now, obviously without winning it, but he's won the European title. He's boxed tough opponents, probably boxed better opponents than Chris as well. So, you know, it's no pushover. There's a reason why he's never been anybody's voluntary defence. But stars make fights. I know it's an old cliche, but I think Chris, after winning the world title in front of 15,000 in his home stadium against a British guy, how do you really get up for that? You know, you're not going to get up for it against an opponent that's not relevant. You know, at least like with Masternak, he knows like this is a hard fight. He was watching Masternak boxing people like Bellew and all those guys whenever he was still an amateur, so he's got a lot of respect for that opponent. And I think, you know, getting him up for a world title fight is not that he needs to get up for it, of course not, because he's worked so hard to get here, but it's more taking your eye off the ball, whereas he's going to bed, you know he's going to bed thinking, I've got a hard night's work in 2 days' time. So it's been a calculated decision, but also one that has to coincide with the TV. They want a decent fight. The promoters, obviously, Masternak was originally the mandatory challenger, then he flipped the script, went over to the IBF. It was whatever went on there, but most importantly, we're fighting Masternak. We're happy to fight Masternak. He's getting paid well. He's going to put on a good show. He's in his hometown. He's defending his world title, which is the most important things.
You mentioned there kind of and I agree with what you've said, the kind of the come down, as it were, from boxing at Bournemouth Stadium, 15,000 people against somebody, of course, in Lawrence Okolie that you both knew very, very well at the time, and before that, of course. Have you noticed a difference in Chris since becoming world champion? I asked him, but a very kind of nonplussed sort of way that he responded. But you see him in the gym every day. Has there been, you know, people often talk about, you know, become a world champion, it adds 10, 20% to your game. Have you seen that in him?
No, it can do one of two things. It can add 10, 20%, or it can take 10 or 20% away from you. And I've had fighters in the past that, you know, like George Groves, when he did win the world title, our best performance came after he won the world title in Eubank. That was a great night. And I think, you know, I genuinely believe if he hadn't have dislocated his shoulder and gone into a Callum Smith fight the same night that he boxed Eubank, I think it would have been a completely different story. these are all fabrications. But what my point being that, he'd worked so hard to get there, and then when he did get it, he didn't take his eye off the ball. Whereas other fighters I've worked with that were a bit more touted to become world champions, and in their head, they were told that you're definitely going to become a world champion. It's more of a matter of when, rather than if. And I think with those kind of guys, as soon as they get that title, they just think, all right, well, maybe I won't do a 12-week camp. Maybe I'll do a 10-week camp, and maybe I won't start my diet straight away. I'll start it in a couple of weeks, and it'll be all right. And miss a few days here and there, and go home at weekends a day early or whatever. And that's where the arguments have always happened with me. I've always been like, you need to make sure you're preparing like you were the challenger. It's as simple as that. I know these are old cliches, but that's just it's so truthful, and really, like, take the belt away. Masternak is a great fight for Chris Billam-Smith. It's just a great fight. It's a great experience for him. He needs that to continue to develop as a fighter. He's had a world-class opponent in Lawrence Okolie, but he's awkward, and then he's boxed the guy in Riakporhe, which he lost in the split, who's now got to world level, but the two of them weren't quite there yet, whereas they've both done their development. And I think Masternak's been at this level for so long. Is he over the hill? I don't think so. I think he keeps himself in fantastic shape. I think he's gradually been getting better and better. And if you watch the Bellew fight, his last few fights have looked way better than he was in 2015. So he is a student to the game, Masternak. And I think this is a great fight for Chris, because he knows he's got to think about himself as a challenger, and I think he's done that. And it's gonna stand him in good stead moving forward. It's gonna be a hard fight at times, and I think he has to approach it sensibly, but I know he will.
What are you expecting from Masternak? Obviously, without divulging your master plan on fight night, what are you expecting from him for people who maybe haven't seen as much of him as you have?
I think he's going to try and box Chris on the back foot. I think he's going to try and he's got good boxing brain. He's got a good jab. He's got a good 1-2 and decent long left hook as well. And he uses his feet well, and he knows that he can get. Like, for him to be busy, it doesn't tax him. Do you know what I mean? Other fighters, when they're working, they're out working. Do you know what I mean? Especially guys that are keeping it long. But I think because he doesn't really try and load up, he's got good punch output. And that's why I think we will have to press this fight. But we've worked on a few things, and I'm pretty sure they'll be able to come to fruition. And I think it will make him look really good. So that's the most important thing, is he gets through this fight, he learns from it. Will he stop him? Probably, most likely not. But I wouldn't be surprised if he did. If he did get to him, because people like Dorticus and stuff had him hurt throughout the fight. Bellew had him hurt in the fight, but none of them were able to change up the gears. Whereas Chris is not as big of a puncher, single punch of both of those, but he puts his flurries together well. And I think but at the same time, you can't take your eye off. You can't switch off. You can't give free shots away at distance. He's got to be switched on for 36 minutes.
We're in our fourth Bournemouth fight in a row down here. Do you think that's added anything to Chris's game? Obviously, it's kind of seemed to me, at least from the outside looking in, the last couple of years, things have really clicked for him, getting to that world level. Really, the Tommy McCarthy rematch onwards is where things really started to seem like they were rolling for him. Does being here have anything to do with that, or is it something that you've noticed in the gym?
It's confidence and it's experience. He only had like 40 amateur fights. He was amateur a long time, but when he turned pro with me, he hadn't developed as an amateur. A lot of these fighters, like coming out of the GB setup, like they've had such world-class sparring that throughout the years, that even though the coaching might not be specific or towards their style, they're still developing because they're getting world-class sparring at least 4 times a week. And they're around good fighters and stuff. Whereas when Chris came to me, he was winging it on his own and he hadn't developed. So really, he was doing the development in the gym and looking good in sparring, but he just couldn't transition it into fights. Robin Dupree was a prime example. Like, he looked great in that camp. Like, same thing with Riakporhe, the first fight. He was looking good. He was pressing the fight, but when he got there, didn't quite know what to do. He was running around on the back foot, trying to keep it long, trying to out-jab him, then realised late on in the fight that really the best thing to do was press the fight. And that was just too late. I still thought he nicked it, but it was in the balance, right? But he's just mature and he knows what he does well. And he used to idolise people that kept it long, but really he is much more effective and better when he presses it. So, and he's got much better vision in close, and he's a very good pressure fighter. He just needed to know that and learn it, and it's just all a part of a process. But yeah, being down here has given him that confidence that he that he deserves to be here. He's selling out to this arena, I think, in less than a week. Pre-sale, and then obviously whenever they went on full sale, like within that time frame, it was genuinely just open probably about a week or whatever. So that shows that there's a demand for him down here, and that gives him the confidence, because he did 15,000 in the time before. I know the football stadium sort of advertised it, but still, like, they came to watch the guy from Bournemouth, and I think he's got a lot of recognition down here. He's getting a lot more recognition on Sky because he's headlined. This is the 4th time, and we've got to say big thank you to Sky Sports, Ed Robinson, and of course Ben Shalom and John Wish at Boxer, because they've realised that he was a headline. I think beforehand he was seen as a chief support act or whatever, like a guy that was, he was good, but it's already there's a place for him on the bill, but maybe chief support or second fight in, and that's just not, that wasn't fulfilling him. Do you know what I mean? As a personality as well, I think this is the most important thing. People have put time and effort into him. The same amount of time that me and Jake and my dad have been putting in for the last 7 years, building him up as a person, as a fighter, as a personality, and and just helping him with his journey like we believed. And I'm so glad that another promoter and TV network have also understood that and realised that creates a fantastic atmosphere down there.
You mentioned that kind of long journey that you've all been on together. I mean, even now, you kind of see on your Instagram stories, you've got sons of similar sort of ages playing with each other, and you've really been on this kind of journey from kind of amateur, with all due respect, who wasn't a highly touted amateur, to now world champion, and kind of your development and your progression as well as people.
Yeah.
How much does that mean to you aside from the boxing?
Oh, it's mega. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be hard for me to replicate the journeys that I've been on, because a lot of the time I was training guys that were my age. George Groves, my age. Campbell, a little bit older. Chris, a little bit younger. That sort of you get on with those lot. You know what I mean? You get on with those guys. And I think now it's Adam's 21. Caroline's 22. Ellie's 25. So, they're great people. It's just you're seen much more as a senior. And I think, it's just going to be a different experience for me. But, seeing Chris literally, giving him money to jump on a train and come down to training and then staying in my house because he couldn't afford it, and then get me and George or me and Luke or even just most of the time myself, just cooking him dinners and stuff like that, and him just winging it. And I was thinking, is there going to be a long-term project here? And then my dad was giving him monthly money for 2 years, just to keep him afloat. And then, he's suddenly just, and for us, it's is he going to do it? Do you know what I mean? Is it going to click? Because he had talent, but it was a long process to develop it. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of the time, there's a prime example was someone like Josh Pritchard. He was a very similar situation to Chris, more established in the amateurs, but we took him on and the same thing, and then he failed his brain scan in year 2. And it's and these things happen, and sometimes it doesn't work out for fighters, but it has worked out for Chris, and it's just amazing to see him now headlining, getting paid really well, got a missus, he's married, he's got a little kid, and he's got his house, got car, got everything that you would want, the stability that you need. It's nice to see it all happen. And then most importantly, he's won the British, Commonwealth, European, and now world title. So, it really is from now on about just getting the best fights that create the legacy, unifications, and setting new goals. And he's just taken one goal at a time, and he's achieved every single thing to date. And I genuinely believe he can win on Sunday, and then at some stage become a unified world champion.
You mentioned that, and I'm sure neither yourself or Chris will be looking past Masternak this weekend, but he is on the doorstep of those big fights. Obviously, Richard Riakporhe is kind of lingering in the background. Lawrence Okolie, of course, still wants his rematch. Which one of those do you think is the most likely, and where do you think we'll see Chris progress to in 2024?
Well, I think potentially it might be more Riakporhe, because Okolie, I heard there's whispers that he might be considering a move up to Bridgeweight. So... but the most important thing, as we said, is Sunday, get the win, and then we'll see and discuss. Could be Riakporhe. Saudi might come in with a huge bid and want to put that show on as a unification. I know they're tackling the heavyweights at the moment. I think their next intent is to tackle the cruiserweights, then go light heavyweight and work their way down. So you just never know. But we got a win, and he's got to be impressive as well, and make sure that he's not picking up any injuries, because 33 years of age, he's been in some hard fights, but his body's fresh and fit, but you can't switch off. And sometimes all it takes is one punch or one thumb in the eye or something like that sets you back 8-10 months, and that's boxing. So he has to be proper switched on.
We saw Richard Riakporhe return with a stoppage win over Dylan Brejon, of course, former opponent of Chris Billam-Smith as well. What did you make of that performance, and also his development since 5 years ago now was the first fight between Chris Billam-Smith and Riakporhe? 2018?
2019.
Was it?
Yeah, July 21st, 2019. But yeah, he is he getting better? Maybe. I don't know. We'll see whenever the two of them fight. I know Chris is getting better, but he might also not visibly see it. One thing that's for sure, the pair of them are a lot more experienced. So Dylan Brejon got like 2 weeks' notice, got stopped by Seslak, just didn't really want the fight. You could tell he just wasn't up for it. But nonetheless, it was a good right hand.
Moving away from Chris Billam-Smith onto something rather stable, Adam Azim. Of course, we saw him pick up the European super lightweight title with a win over Frank Petitjean. Haven't spoke to you since then. Won't dwell too long on it. What did you make of his performance on the night? And of course, Enoch Poulsen on February 3rd.
Yeah, I thought Petitjean was a great learning fight for him. I was disappointed with Petitjean, the fact that he didn't try. He came to run, but that's just the way it is sometimes. I remember Josh Taylor, we had him boxing Miguel Vasquez, and Vasquez just literally ran around the ring, and he was coming. He's not engaging with me at all. I said, look, he's trying to get you tired. He thinks you're inexperienced. He's going to try and get you late on and start nicking rounds. And I think Petitjean had that intent. He spoke to us afterwards. He said, I was going to try and press the fight from 5 rounds in, but your fitness is unbelievable, and your pace and your speed and all that sort of stuff. But if he'd have came to win a little bit more, it would have opened him up a little bit more. But I think we're going to get that in Enoch Poulsen, a guy that had beaten Petitjean. Wasn't that wide on the cards. It was quite close, but he still beat him, and I think it's a genuine step up. But Adams, he's flying. I mean, it's just like he needed that. He knows that he can do it's the first time he's prepped for a 12-round camp. Before that, it was always 10-rounders, and it's just one of those things. You speak to any of the fighters that have been there and done it, like George or Dad or anyone like that. Dad used to fight 15 3-minute rounds with 6-ounce gloves on. So whenever he starts talking, they think that 12 threes with 8s is a blessing. You know what I mean? But it's just good to have those people in the gym that you can bounce off, because and the people like that I know, and we can chat around and bring them into the gym and stuff like that, because it's just reassuring. It's like, really, once you can do 8 rounds from then on in, it's just who can hold their form down the stretch. And if you're conditioned enough, then it will naturally happen. So, a lot of boxes ticked against Petitjean. We're going to have to tick a little bit more boxes when we box Poulsen. but I think he will knock him out.
How long is the plan to hang it around at that level? You hear Adam, and he wants to fight Kambosos, he wants to fight Teofimo Lopez, he'll fight all of them whenever, kind of next week. There's Harlem Eubank kind of around that level. There's Dalton Smith as well around that level. Would you be entertaining those domestic fights, or do you think Adam would look to try and push on to more towards world level?
I think we can definitely box Harlem Eubank. We can definitely box Dalton Smith. It's just whether it makes financial sense. I think Harlem Eubank would be cheaper for Sky to get, and that's no disrespect to Harlem Eubank, but he would. He's not seeing the sort of money that Dalton has, and I think Adam beats the pair of them. But it's just whether it does the numbers for Sky, and Sky are happy with it, and it does the numbers on the gate, because Dalton Smith and Harlem and even Adam, to be honest, they haven't sold enough tickets yet to really make it a standout. And one of them has to excel in ticket sales, and I think that is Adam. He's gradually, the numbers he was doing on Sky, they were really pleased about it. They're starting to see a trend with him, and only a matter of time, 3 or 4 fights time, then people are going to be tuning in more, buying more tickets. They've seen it happen time and time again throughout the years, whether it's been AJ and all these other fighters that they've built up in the past. They notice the trends on the numbers, like Amir Khan and stuff like that. So, they're very happy with it, and so I think he will start shipping more tickets and selling more on the gate, because the views on TV are good, but we just need to get that onto the gate, and then mainly just for the promoters, for them to actually be able to put on an event in a good stadium, sell out a load of tickets, put as a headline, and that just takes time. That's definitely around the corner. Whether it's 6 months around the corner, 18 months around the corner, who knows? But it's definitely within those two time frames, and I think he beats both of them. It's just a matter of time.
Okay, well, I think that's probably about all the time that we have, because we've got to get you downstairs. Do appreciate your time so close to the fight. One thing that I do want to ask you about is a big fight that's tomorrow night, stateside. Devin Haney versus somebody you're very familiar with in Regis Prograis. How does that fight go?
I think Prograis 35. I think his best days were when he was in the WBSS. He was on good form. My former fighter Josh Taylor beat him in the final in a fantastic fight, nip and tuck. And I just don't think he's been the same since. He just hasn't looked as confident. He had that invincibility. Like, he thought every time he hit someone, he was going to get an effect. And that fight with Josh, he was bouncing shots off him, and he just couldn't get an effect. And I think ever since then, I think he started to question his punch power. He got dropped in his last fight, even though it wasn't a knockdown. He definitely got dropped. He's 35. He's been on the weight a long time. He's starting to look leaner, which I don't think is necessarily a good thing, because when you get too lean, sometimes your punch resistance goes a little bit. Will Devin Haney have the punch power to really capitalise it? No, but he has the accuracy. And I think he is patient enough and he's good enough at length to be able to win in a pretty comprehensive manner. I think it will be a 8-4, maybe even 9-3. But I don't think there'll be much excitement in terms of knockdowns. Haney's been hurt by Linares, but it was like in a flurry. Prograis is more of a pot shotter, 2-3 shots maximum, and he won't put the 5th, 6th on the end of it. And I don't think Haney's defensively sound enough to be able to take those 2 away from you. So I just think, will it be a good fight? Maybe. There'll always be that level of excitement because Prograis can punch, but Haney's sharp and he sits behind the jab, and he'll just pick him apart.
Is he better than you expected him to be, Devin Haney? Sorry, I'm going to wrap things up, but I know somebody that you looked at when Luke Campbell was down, and he was kind of in that mix at WBC for the lightweight titles. Obviously, since then he's gone on to get a couple of good wins.
Luke had great feet. That's why I want that fight for Luke Campbell, because Luke had great feet. If we had it in a big enough ring, he'd be able to just, even if he was hitting arms and gloves, and Luke was able to control it on the lead hand. I just saw that as a fight that I would like, because Luke would be so patient that he would force Devin Haney to come to him. Whereas most of the time, Haney just sits there, waits, a bit like Shakur Stevens. They just sit, wait, and just drag it out. And then next thing you know, they start picking up rounds on the jab, jab up and jab down to the body. Do I think he's ever exciting? Not really. I don't think he's going to be like a trendsetter and one of those greats that goes down in history, because he's just not got enough punch power. You know, the greats are the ones like Pacquiao, De La Hoya, even like Mayweather early on in his career was knocking everyone out. Like, you know, those guys like Roy Jones, he was fast and elusive, but he could like bang. And I just think Haney's too safe. But he is technically very, very sound, and he's, you know, he's got an aura about him that, you know, people around boxing enjoy and like. But I don't know. We'll see.
We will indeed. Shane McGuigan, always a pleasure. Thanks very much for speaking to Boxing News, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Cheers, mate.